won't say I'll add to it. I'll actually argue that point, Don, in the fact that cuts to the Department of Education, um, they don't impact the rural farmer in Iowa or Nebraska. These the cuts to the Department of Education are so that the states will be stronger. And so where I'm going with this is most of these red states, they don't want a Department of Education telling them through the DEI or whatever they want to argue about or whatever they want to go crazy about. They don't want to have to teach that stuff to their kids. They don't want to have to cover the civil rights movement or slavery in the same way. And so, however, we cover that in Birmingham, Alabama, the person in Spokane, Washington may want a different version of history taught to their kids. So even if they were to bring it up, the spin would be different. These
So
people don't care about the what am I trying to say? There being a one standard of education
Yeah.
across the board being taught nationally. No, they're not interested in that. Most, I won't say most, I'll say many of the Republicans that I have interfaced with believe in a certain version of history, and they want that taught to their kids, and they don't want someone in LA having any input whatsoever in what that should be. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying at least frame it right.
I mean, I also think that there's like a very naked political explanation for this, which
Yeah.
is dysfunctionality in Jackson, Mississippi, in Birmingham, Alabama, in Montgomery, Alabama, is political capital in conservative Republican politics in these states, right? And so if you remove oversight of the Department of Education, which is not just about funding, right? It's like the Department of Education has an entire civil rights division that has not just protected Black students and students of color, but students with disabilities, right?
Certainly.
And so you remove that layer of protection. Who's going to feel it worse? Are urban school districts, poor school districts, Black-run school districts, and that gives every Republican seeking legislative seats, statewide seats, to say, "Look at Jackson. Can't even run their schools. Look at Birmingham public schools. It's a mess." Right?
Yeah.
And so like you give them that gift for
Yeah.
for the next generation at least.
It feels like the Department of Education being eliminated, and I won't say obviously because we are in what Bill Simmons used to call the Tyson zone, right, where anything can happen at this point. In this,
Right.
like, given that Mike Tyson would do anything, there was a he's calmed down now, but there was a phase in his life where you could read anything about Mike Tyson, and that might be that. Yes, that could be believed, right?
I thought you were saying we're gonna get knocked out in the first 30 seconds of the fight.
Well, I mean, touche, right? Touche. But it seems to me that the one of the multiple end games of this Department of Education thing is yes, you're right, Iva, to central to take back power, take back authority over curriculum and governance to the states. Sure. I mean, to that I would argue that Black folks have never been able to rely upon, or frankly, any marginalized group has never been able to rely on states for civil rights protections, particularly in the South. Right? It's not go. That's not. That's why you need a federal government. But more importantly, look, I was in the legislature in a deeply red state as it was making the transition to deeply red from purple. And look, it's very clear to me that the education agenda, and I was not often voting with Democrats on this stuff. I was very much pro school choice, but as I got older, I realized that that aligned me with a group of people who did not want public education to exist. And dismantling the Department of Education is part of that agenda, whether or not we like it. I'm not saying that the charter school guys want this or whatever, but there is a universe of people who seek to profit off of public education or whatever else, but for multiple reasons, many of them commercial, they do not want public schools to exist. And in my view, that's kind of one of my great regrets of being in the legislature. I wanted school choice and I wanted kids to have an alternative to failing public schools. But fundamentally, public schools should exist, and they are good to exist, and they are a way out of poverty, or they are a way to sustaining a baseline quality level of life in this country. And wanting them to not exist seems to me to be a functional outcome of dismantling the Department of Education.
Um, so you just said something, whether it was intentional or not, I don't know if it was important. At first, you said they don't want public education to exist, and you said they don't want public schools to exist. I would agree with the latter. They don't want public schools to exist. They're not. They're actually like not arguing that education budgets should go away or be reduced. They're asking for public education budgets to be reallocated to individual families.
Well, that defunds public schools.
Right. And so yeah, like they don't give a shit about public schools at all. Right? It's a version of it's the state's version of states' rights. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, which is
Mhm.
Um,
which
you
has
know,
fundamentally never been good for us.
local control has never been good for black folks. Yeah, because when you said that, it was interesting, and I was like, no, like they want their public education money. They just want it to come to them, and um, in the same way that after Brown, they started like throwing up these like fake ass academies in trailer parks essentially,
Yes.
and just like pocketing all this public money. Um, and you can draw a straight line between that kind of movement and what's happening now. I mean, look at the news that's come out in the last week about fourth grade reading scores,
Mhm.
It
lowest
was
in a generation.
Fox News headline, so I'm not
Yeah,
aware. What's the story here?
it's like lowest in a generation,
Fourth
something
grade
like that.
reading scores are up.
In some places, like Mississippi leads the nation. Like good for them, but also college admissions are down, college applications are down.
Mm.
Like people are seeking out less education, and if you look at the exit polls or even some of the polling before the election, where Republicans perform strongest are in populations that hold the least education, even more so than race, even more so than income.
I was about to bring that up as a matter of fact. And let me throw this out there.
Rock on.
Um, when you look at education, right? And a lot of people hate when I say this, but I'm glad we're talking about it because it's one of those things that we debate in theory, right? We know that the giving money to the child hurts public education, right? But as the individual, as the parent of the child that is sitting in a languishing school, do you care, right? So when we talk about this argument of you know school choice, you know, I for one, I I love public schools and I see the value in public schools and I hear the argument of how it impacts Black families and minority families. But if I had a child in that position, let's not act like I wouldn't take my money and put my child in a better situation. We're doing that already as we, look at white flight and black flight into the suburbs and things like that. So I just think it's really, and I know you guys are coming from a genuine place of concern for our people, right? But it's really rich when people come with this argument and they don't live in a district with a school that is failing its kids.
Yeah, but
That's
there's reasons to not, right? And so you might be over leveraging to move to a better neighborhood. You might be over leveraging to come up with the tuition for private school. I mean, all things considered, you have executed whatever version was at your fingertips of school choice to not be in a struggling public school district. And so I don't think that, all right, so I'm out here in the burbs. I hate it, but I'm out here to access a quality public school district rather than hold my breath in the DC lottery, right?
right.
But listen, from a policy perspective, I wish I had not had to do that, right? And I wish that folks don't have to come up with 40 racks a year for quality private school tuition in the DMV. And maybe I could have scraped it together for one of them, but not for two, right? So it wasn't gonna happen. So you had to I mean, look, man, I'm not Iva, you and I have had the battles over the years, but I'm not gonna let you call me a hypocrite for getting my kids out because
I'm
Oh
not.
man.
I'm not. I'm not calling you a hypocrite at all. And
yeah,
I'm glad you said that so I can clarify. What I'm saying here is as we look at the argument, at the debate of schools and the National Department of Education, what I'm saying is that whereas we talk about those things, they're not what we vote on. They really aren't. That and so I think we bring these conversations in, particularly Democrats bring these conversations in because they are the right thing to do and they're the right conversations to have. But Republicans talking about what's going on with you right now. They don't care about the future. It's about right now. It's about money in your pockets right now. Don't worry about the environment. All that kind of stuff will take care of itself, right? My kids don't even, I don't mean this literally, but my kids don't even go to college. My kids work on trucks.
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't, you know what I mean? So it's like, I'm
yeah.
just
That's
really
right.
trying to paint a picture that this debate is not moving the needle.
Yeah, well, and it's an inherently, and particularly when you're talking about higher ed, right? It's an inherently upper class thing when 25% of, at least when I went to college, 25% of Americans have a degree, period. And we're not talking about Morehouse, Howard, you know what I'm saying? University. We're talking about a degree from directional state university. We're talking about 25% at all. So if you're talking about college and college affordability and hey, I'm gonna save black people by forgiving student loans, you ain't talking to the vast majority of everyday Americans' real experience. And I certainly think that's one place where Democrats have dropped the ball. So let's be clear. To the extent that I have concerns with the Department of Education closing at all, I want to say that 80% of them are vested in K through 12. And higher ed, I'm deeply invested in the HBCU community and their success, and I think higher education, is a path towards prosperity in this country. But to even have the privilege of talking about higher education is having a very classist discussion in this country where the vast majority of us don't pursue post-secondary education.
And a third of us don't even like education. You
At
ask
all.
you ask 3 kids in school, do they want to be there? one of them is going to be like, no. As a matter of fact, I don't. One of the kids is going to be there because mommy and daddy says they have to.
They have to
And
be.
then one of those kids really is that student.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, in in some ways, we are talking to the 75% of folks who don't get a college degree, um, because even though vast income inequality exists and the wealth gap is what it is, like college education and, and opening up access to college education, like has been a path um, to the middle class, in some ways into like the upper echelons of wealthier classes for black folks, put black folks in highly visible places, right? Which is why we're having a conversation about DEI, because like it worked kind of good. It wasn't perfect, right? But like it did a little bit of what it was intended to do. And so a lot of the folks who didn't benefit from that are like, oh, like I'm just seeing this dude who like got a bachelor's degree and is making more money than me, and like I've been working in my trade or as much as me, for 2 decades, and now we're having this conversation about like forgiving their student loan debts, which like I got to pay for, and so it's like it's fueled a lot of that backlash too. Um, and I was going to make a point, just going back to K through 12 for a second. Um, Separate but equal wasn't a bad idea, right? But Southern states were never going to implement it equitably, and so sort of conceptually, school choice, like we can have all kinds of different discussions about what that looks like. Having spent as much time in Southern states as I have, and been in rooms with the folks making laws, I know that when Southern legislatures start talking about school choice, like it's not going to benefit us. Like um, they don't have us in mind. Tr- try moving to some of these Birmingham suburbs or Jackson suburbs with your black family, to access some of these better public school districts if you want to, and then you got to deal with a whole different kind of problem, um, which is a cultural problem, or as they like to call it, a demographic problem. We're having conversations in southern suburbs about like the changing demographics of the school systems. And it's just because like black folks have followed white folks in some ways to some of these better school districts, and white people are just like, I moved out here to get away from y'all. And so like that's how they think about school choice.
And going all the way back to your original question, Don, do y'all really think the person that's watching Fox News wants to hear this shit?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they don't, going back to these things not being on their TV screens, what have we said in the past few minutes that's wrong? Nothing. What have we
Well,
said that they would be interested in hearing? Also nothing.
Iva, you are doing something fascinating. Speaking of independent media, you do not have a feed account, but you have created the Intravenous podcast, covering all things 205 Alabama politics. Like you have really done something fascinating because while there are outlets like the Reckon doing the Lord's work, you are showing people how government really works by talking to everybody in the city of Birmingham who holds power, who holds a budget. Everybody wants to talk to Randall or the police chief. Like you have really dug into how this game works by talking to every public relevant stakeholder through this show, man. And it's fascinating, not only as just a picture of Birmingham, but a picture of how public affairs and government works, man. So talk about the Urban Ham Network and Intravenous and tell the folks where we can find you, man.
Man, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it a little bit. I knew I wanted a podcast, right? I knew I wanted to get into podcasting, and I wanted to get into a little bit of storytelling. Um, I did not enter this thinking that it would turn political. But I'm just a political creature. I don't know how to get away from it. I'm like Michael Corleone. Every time I try to get out, they pull me
Pull
back
me back.
in.
They pull me right
And
back.
so what I noticed in my first iteration of this thing was that people really do want to know what Randall is like, right? They don't they don't care what happened at Birmingham City Council today. They don't care what he, initiatives he's working on, right? They saw a picture of him. What was he doing at such and such? And you know,
He was kicking it.
who was that person with him? And just little, people are always interested in just the most mundane, entertaining things. They really get burnt out on news, right?
Hmm.
So I spend the first. I'm gonna fast forward all the way forward to where we are now, instead of talking about where it came from. But I took the one aspect of the entertaining side. First part of the conversation is who, what, when, where, why, what you got on,
Yep. Yep.
what's your favorite cologne, Alabama or Auburn, state of
Yep.
A&M. People get to have their questions asked,
Yep.
everything they always wanted to know. And then the last few minutes, we actually talk about some real news. We talk
Yeah.
about what's really going on, or whatever piece of information I'm trying to convey. And so I just learned how to hook people in by talking. And the easiest way, and I don't know if you've ever paid attention to this, but the easiest way to explain my podcast is in the promotion, right? When you see a person look at me, when they see me, you can tell they're looking at a friend. They're
Yeah.
looking at somebody that they really know. And so that's the dynamic that I bring to it, right? You're sitting there, Don Calloway, who everybody knows and loves and sees in one light, but we talking shit about, you know, what it's like at Congressional Black Caucus, or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be, whatever little fun thing. And then for the last 5 minutes, we talk about the fact that the Department of Education is getting shut down.
Yeah.
And we want to talk about that for a second. So I found a little formula there that is three parts entertainment and one part what's going on, and you know teaching people a little bit about anything from raising money and campaigns, and because a lot of us aren't used to that. We don't come from that. We don't see the need in it. So having a conversation with a politico talking about, hey man, we really need to write Kamala a check and not just sit here on social media, right? But that's how it is. So people can find it on www.urbanham.news. It's very Birmingham centric, very Alabama centric, but you there's a volume, there's a library there. So anybody
Hey.
you possibly know can think
No.
of that has
Yeah. No, you
in
have.
Birmingham politics or Alabama politics has been
I
on the show.
I think the show is so important, man, because no, you don't have 1 million followers. No, it doesn't produce $1 million a year off of streams, but you have built an archive, and if you watch it together, it shows how to play this game. And if every city had a Urban Ham Network and an Intravenous podcast, folks would understand their civic affairs and their civic officials a lot better, right? Rather than having to rely on these well-funded, news networks with this prestige journalism like Ryan was doing, like, which is extraordinarily important work. And Ryan, you've been at it for a long time, but like in a universe where folks are selectively removing certain voices from the official press rooms of government, that work is even more elevated, which is why we got to pay attention to Urbanham. We got to pay attention to Wrecking Black Joy as it continues. We got to follow Ryan Nave on Blue Sky because he's going to say
I,
important things that he might
I'm,
not have a
I'm still on
platform
Twitter,
on
raising
Twitter.
hell.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And so, what's next, Ryan? What do you see happening over the course of this next year, both in the Negro news game in general, in the Trump era, and whatever you want to talk on, man? Speak on it.
Throughout my work in journalism, I've helped build out two newsrooms here in Alabama, one in Mississippi. Now, that work is important. There should be more of it going forward. Like just the way the math is set up, the numbers are set up. There's like we're not going to see a massive expansion of legacy newsrooms.
Right.
There will not be millions of journalists hired. The work of journalism is especially local journalism, and I love the way you framed it, Iva. That you just focused on the people. One of the things that I used to love to do was there would be 12 people who ran for Ward 2 council members, and you just try to interview them all. Right?
Yeah,
Like, that's such an important public service. It's also fucking fascinating as a journalist.
Yeah.
And so that important work will be done by people like Iva.
yeah,
And in spaces like the Intravenous 205 podcast, if it's what you want, I hope it becomes a $1 billion media company. It
yeah.
may not, but it serves a very important civic good in a
Yes.
place like Birmingham that needs more of it. And so, actually, like the work that I want to do, the work that really interests me, I love writing, I love editing. I'm really about this idea of how do we reimagine the journalism that's necessary right now, and how can I be in a place to help Iva, build out, his vision into what Intravenous 205 wants to be, and how can I help, start up newsrooms and start up media companies. I've had a little bit of experience on with revenue stuff, and like helping people build media companies that provide this public service, that provides necessary journalism, that gives people access to their public officials, because everybody can't go to a city council meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday. Put people in those rooms, and that's just the work that I'm excited about. And so I hope to be working on some projects. I'm not pitching you, Iva. I want to do some consulting work, some freelance work. And maybe I'll write a story or two in the next year or so while I figure out, like, is there a thing that I want to do, or do I just want to like support folks who are doing this work in as many different spaces as possible?
That's what's up, man. Well, look, since we've mentioned my man's multiple times, we got to plug our brother,
Yes.
Son of Birmingham by Mayor Randall Woodfin. Uh,
Co-written by Ed Bowser. Don't
Co-written by the great Ed Bowser.
Yeah,
Break
shout
down,
out
who is
to
Ed
Ed.
Bowser, man? Who is Ed Bowser before we get into this?
Ed is the deputy comms director, I think, for the city or for the
Yeah.
mayor's
That's right.
office. Yeah, but just a great dude. Encyclopedic knowledge of music.
Really?
Just a great guy.
Yeah, he has
His wife
tens of
worked for.
thousands of followers on Twitter, uh, following him about his music tastes
Wow.
and,
I
and
did not know
Yeah,
that.
whatnot. So,
I
yeah,
didn't know that. And that's the thing. One of the things about the book is that the chapters are named for Outkast songs. Randall is
yeah.
probably the world's second largest Outkast fan to me. I think me and Bomani Jones are tied for number one, and Randall is a significant but distant second. and the chapters are named after Outcast songs, but it's ultimately like a very non-linear memoir based upon things and events that happened during his time as mayor. And I think
Yeah.
Iva, you and I have had a unique perch, and you as well, Ryan, as a Southern journalist, we've had a unique perch. And this is not a dude that we're objective about. We're extremely proud of him. We love him. And I think Randall has been a wonderful example of like what leadership is supposed to look like, particularly in a post-Trump era. And that's not over with just because he got reelected. It's time to dig back in, and now our leaders are more mature. But it's an excellent book. Pick that up if you haven't. He's on a book tour right now, but while still mayoring and still daddying, which wasn't a thing 8 years ago. So
Yeah.
yeah, check that out, Son of Birmingham. Get that for your bae for Valentine's Day. If you have a young anybody really who's interested in politics, I just think it's a really, really important book. I read it in about less than 24 hours. It was that fascinating. And really talks about a lot of recent events, how you got through COVID, how you got elected, fatherhood, all of that. But again, I'm an MSNBC guy, so in many respects, maybe I'm part of the problem here. But like, I'm
You
deeply
are.
invested.
You absolutely are.
But I'm deeply invested in materials that teach our people the game, teach our people the stakes of politics, teach our people how you can play, how you can participate in unconventional ways. And I think Randall certainly pulls that off here. One of the themes and I'm always thinking about as we create new materials, even here on the caucus room, is like Big said, you slinging crack rock or you got a wicked jump shot, or you can be in politics, right? And I understand that this is a career, this is a profession that
It's a
ultimately
vocation.
it's
Yeah.
a vocation. It is a
Yeah.
professional practice, and you can ultimately do a whole lot of public good in it and make decent money and leave a lasting impact. And I think this book really, really kind of it's a vehicle to help teach people the game in a cool and accessible way. So pick that up. That's Son of Birmingham, Randall Woodfin. 2025. I expect to be checking in with you all, my Alabama OGs. Ryan Nave, before you go, tell the people where they can find you. But in the wake of the Reckons temporary pause and everything we talked about who you can and can't trust, who are you reading? Who do you go to for news sources that are going to make you smarter and that you can believe every day about what's happening in the world?
Yeah, so find me on all social platforms, X, Blue Sky, Instagram. Black Joy by Reckon is transitioning off the Reckon website to NJ.com. You can probably just search Black Joy Reckon, Black Joy New Jersey. Search star Dunnigan. You will find the Black Joy newsletter. I encourage folks to seek it out. Subscribe. Comes out 3 days a week. Despite everything that's happening with Reckon, I'm extremely proud that work is continuing. Extremely proud to have worked with Star and building that into something as great as it's been. Who am I reading? Yeah, I mean, like a lot of people, I unplugged from the news a little bit after the election, and then I got laid off, and I unplugged from the news almost entirely.
Good for you, man.
Um,
Good for you.
and so, like I'm trying to, I'm trying to read, dig into and make my way through my unread books pile. Ta-Nehisi's there. I'm reading James. I bought James before it won the National Book Award. Just because of the Twain and Missouri connection, I was very interested in his retelling of that story.
Wait, James, what are we talking about?
James Percival Everett. It's the
Oh, yes, yes, yes,
it's the
yes. Okay.
retelling of Huck Finn through the lens of Jem.
Gotcha.
Oh, okay.
And so yeah, that's a fantastic book. I'm trying to keep up with my New Yorkers, but I'm also trying to read who's doing good kind of local nonprofit independent journalism. I'm still very much following the news in Mississippi. fascinating what's happening in Jackson. They also have a mayor's race. Um, there's some litigation happening involving some elected officials.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
all that stuff is fascinating. Um, Maybe I'm in a place to think about how I can write about some of it, just based on some of my expertise, experience, and access to folks. Um, but like I'm trying to ride my bike and walk
Yeah.
and go for hikes and enjoy nature. Because eventually I'll end up back in the rat race. And in a lot of ways, I'm very grateful to have this time to be able to think
Yeah.
and not drink from the water hose,
Yeah.
and really ponder you know, what is, what is the world? What is God? How does he want to use me right now? And so that's mainly what I'm focused on for the most part.
That's what's up.
Don, aside from Jeff Johnson coming up, what you got? What you got coming up down the
Johnson,
pipe?
That dropped today, right? Yeah.
OG Jeff Johnson, yeah, he dropped today on the Caucus Room.
Okay.
So the Caucus Room on Valor. These are our remote episodes where we're able to talk to people, talk more excuse me, talk more topical on the politics of the day. But I still am committed to like the OG prestige episodes of the Caucus Room. Either one of you all are welcome to join if ever here in the DMV. So yes, today we dropped the season 1 finale with Jeff Johnson. And next week, I think we have the season 1 premiere with brother Quentin James, and y'all probably know Quentin and Stephanie Brown James. They're the founders of the Collective Pack. Where we have Quentin on. Quentin and Stephanie. It's just Quentin, not Stephanie, but she's welcome anytime. But the Collective Pack is the most significant achievement for African Americans in the history of American campaign finance. They have built something significant, elected president, vice president, governors, senators, multiple members of Congress, multiple mayors, all by raising money in the interest of building black political power where there was not before. So where you're talking about maybe not something as minor as a dog catcher, but where you're talking about the opportunity to insert a black mayor where there was not before, or a black senator where there was not before, or a black governor. And they've been at it. So they started right when I started Pine Street 8 years ago, and 9 years ago now, and they have just built a remarkable presence and have raised millions for black candidates. And so we run through Quentin's journey on the first episode of season 2, which premieres next week. And yeah, just get with the Caucus Room on YouTube as well as Valor Media Network, all right here. And thanks y'all for tuning in. Give us some last words as we get out of here. How do you maintain some purpose and joy uh, in a Trump era where it looks like billionaires are reclaiming their stake and there's a press on the middle class and by powerful forces. Give us something to remain encouraged. What are we to do in this moment?
For me, I go back to the politics 101, and that is, all politics is local, man. Um, it is where I see making the most difference in line with having the most peace.
Yeah,
So, I will be, and I encourage others to, you know, insert yourselves at the local level. Make sure that you are getting the services that you are supposed to get from your local state figures. Find out if this is, a calling for you. I think we had some great young leaders to emerge because of Trump won. I would be interested. I can't wait to look back and see who comes out of the fire and out of the furnace this go round.
yeah, yeah,
But for the most part, um, man, I'm a man of faith. I believe that this is all preordained. And when you look at purpose and when you try to figure out what God wants you to see in these moments, I think at least those that's how my prayers are
Yeah.
answered, and those are the answers I look for. And so, I'm not trying to be cliche, but this, if no other time, this is time to seek God and a higher power and a higher peace.
That's what's up, man. OG Ryan
Yeah.
Nave, bring us home.
Well, I'm gonna try. I don't know if I can say something as eloquent as that, but um, I find your people, love on them. In the past year or so, I've had some, my family's dealt with some, health stuff that, took me home, and it really got me thinking about, the world and like you know what does my family need? What support do they need? Beyond me. In a lot of ways, like it informed my voting decisions, right? Because I want somebody competent running, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid,
Yeah.
because I have, retired parents, and like something that drives me so crazy in our politics is this question of, like, are you better off?
Yeah.
Right?
Mm.
Because I'm actually thinking about like about our people, about our families, about our communities, and how can they be better off? And so like however that's driving your political decision making at the local level, the state level, at the political at the federal level, I really wish that like that was at the heart of the question, at the
Yeah.
heart of that question, which is like how can my people be better off, and like how can I help them get there? Um, and I think like if you can go to sleep at night and having answered that question, and done what's best for your people from a place of love, I think you can feel good about how you cast your vote. And if you go to bed thinking like how my crypto performed, like you probably need to do some soul searching, and have some conversation with the higher power. That's what I would say.
There it is. There it is. This is the Caucus Room on Valor Network. Iva Williams, Ryan Nave. Appreciate y'all for joining.
Thank you
Season
so
one
much.
finale up now on YouTube with OG Jeff Johnson. Season 2 coming next week, and we'll see y'all soon. Take care. Thanks for joining us, y'all.